Hello YouTube, and today we are going to be interpreting what I talked about last time, which is Vegetius. Again, here's the book, here's the back cover, here's the front cover, here, right here. Alright, Vegetius. The first book discusses the selection of recruits, a very important topic, the selection of recruits, from what localities, what sort of men should be approved as soldiers, and what military exercise they should be trained. Very well. So, what is this book about? It is about the selection of soldiers. From which regions should they come from? This is an important topic. Vegetius does not discuss genetic questions. He solely discusses environmental ones. But this is a book that should be read by everyone and should be appreciated by all. All right, let's go on. Let's go forward. In ancient times, all right, it was the custom to commit to writing one's studies in the liberal arts. Remember, liberal arts, that is the trivium. You know what I mean. Go to Wikipedia. And offer them summarized in books to emperors. Alright, who's the emperor here? Who's the emperor? I'll tell you later. For nothing is begun rightly unless after God the emperor favors it, nor is it appropriate that anyone should have superior, wider knowledge than the emperor. Does the emperor here have superior, wider knowledge than anyone else? Clearly not. This is not a book addressed to a knowledgeable emperor. This is not a book that can or could be addressed to an emperor who knows much of anything. So, let's go on. This is just, it's not true, but it's not a lie, it's not an inversion. It is, well, it's a deception of sorts, but I will get into that later. That Octavian, Augustus, and good emperors after him readily thought so, is clear from many examples. Thus, with the testimonies of the rulers, eloquence flourished. Eloquence flourished, a very interesting phrase. Can't get into that, but it's an important one. While boldness was not rebuked. Boldness was not rebuked. This is good. Boldness was not rebuked. Why was boldness not rebuked? Because with boldness comes power. And with power comes a very important thing. It is something that many people have talked about, many people know, and many people do indeed engage in. And what is that? It is responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. Spurred on to emulate this, when I reflected that your clemency was better able than others to execute temerity. Temerity. This book is filled with temerity. Why? Because it explains kindergarten level stuff. It explains stuff that everyone should know, but apparently this emperor, who is apparently a total loser in every possible sense, doesn't. I hardly felt my great inferiority to ancient authors. Wow, that is a very interesting phrase. It is a very important one, but there's not enough time to discuss it. Just so you know, the author here is being very, very bold. He is being very bold in discussing very simple stuff to a very unsophisticated and inappropriately trained individual. Let's go on. Yet in this opuscule neither linguistic elegance nor intellectual acumen was needed, but painstaking and faithful labor to put into the public domain for the benefit of Rome. Matters which lay scattered and hidden in the pages of various historians and teachers of military science. I don't know what that means, actually. But let's go on further. We attempt to show then by a number of stages and headings the ancient system of levying and training recruits. Okay, first levying. How do we get recruits? How do we select recruits? How do we figure out who has good ability to be trained, and how do we do that? Very important topic, often ignored, but an important one. And training recruits. Training recruits. What does that mean? It actually means a lot of things here. It means so many different things it's hard to discuss, but okay, for instance, training. What does training mean? Training means sleeping position. Training means fighting ability. Training means running. Training means a lot of very important subjects that it's quite hard to discuss, but I will have to go on. Not that those things would appear unfamiliar to you, Invincible Emperor. Come on. The emperor here is he's a blithering moron. Alright? The emperor is a moron. That is why the book is being written. in order to discuss things that everyone should know, but the emperor has absolutely no clue about. So that you may recognize in your spontaneous dispositions for the safety of the state the principle which the builders of the Roman Empire long ago observed. And in this little book find whatever you think needful to affairs of state, which are ever pressing. Very good phrase, ever pressing. Okay, let's go on to the real meat of the book, which is that the Romans conquered all people solely because of their what? Why did the Romans win? It's their military training, that's why. The Romans won because of their military training. And in every battle, it is not numbers and untaught bravery, so much as skill and training. Skill is indeed genetic, but training is not. Training can be done by anyone. And this, lifting the chin, this is training, all right? This is training. It enables you to use your automatic mind for good purposes, or for bad ones. You don't know which ones you'll use them for. That generally produce the victory. Okay, so what does that mean? In every battle, it's not numbers on time, very so much skill and training that generally produce the victory. What does that mean? Well, it means that people should train in order to fight. And why do they fight? They fight in order to win the battle. They fight in order to make things whole. They fight in order to make the Roman Empire great. Not once again, but forever and always. For we see no other explanation of the conquest of the world by the Roman people. Who are the Roman people, by the way? Now, this is an interesting phrase. The Roman people. What does it mean? Okay, I have to give a brief summary here, because originally the Roman people meant just the people of the city of Rome. Then, by about the 1st century or so, it meant the people of Italy. Then, by the 2nd century, the people of Italy and Spain. Then, by the 3rd century, the people of Italy, Spain, and finally, the provinces. At last, the provinces became included in this Roman people designation. And by the mid-4th century AD, we have a hard concept of the Roman race. The Roman race, people. The Mediterranean race. It was a very racist concept. It did not include all Roman citizens, but this is what the Romans thought of themselves. They thought of themselves very, very strongly as a race. Caldelus discusses this in many of his books, the Roman race. This is a very important concept, and one which you must be familiar with in order to understand this rhetoric here. That they're drill at arms, camp discipline, military expertise. It means a lot of things. I won't go into that. How else could small Roman... The Roman forces were small. He says the Roman forces originally were quite small. And indeed they were. They numbered in the several hundreds. They weren't very notably large. But they defeated people many, many times their numbers. And why did they do that? How could they do that? And why did they accomplish what they did so rapidly? Have availed against hordes of Gauls. How could small stature? The Romans were short. Why were they short? Because they were not nomadic. They were short because they were a people adapted to southerly climes, to southerly agriculture, much like the peoples of Greece, South Italy, Portugal. Indeed, many parts of Armenia and Turkey, all of these people are short. They are short because they are adapted to agriculture. They are short because they are adapted to village life. The tall peoples, the Balkanoids, the Serbs, they are adapted to a life of nomadism, fighting, and a way of living that would not be comfortable to the average person today. That is why the Serbs today are tall. That is why the Germans today are tall. And that is why the Dutch today are so tall. It is because of genetics, but it is also because of historic environment that resulted in these genetics being produced. How could small stature have ventured to confront Germanic tallness? Now, the Germans in this period in Germany did not number more than 2 million people. The Germans as a whole certainly did not amount to more than, let's say, 5 or 6 million people. And that means from the Volga to the Rhine, basically. That is a lot. That is a lot, and it is something you should know about. That the Spaniards surpassed our men not only in numbers, but in physical strength is obvious. In physical strength, the Spaniards surpassed the Romans in physical strength and numbers? How could that be? Well, let's take a look. The population of Italy, back in the day, around 5 or 6 million. The population of Spain, around 4-ish million, maybe. But the population of South Italy, which was just where the Romans were located, was around 3 million or so. So the Spaniards were indeed more populous than the Romans. And in physical strength. Now, why would Spaniards surpass the Romans in physical strength? Well, partly because they had more... Did they have more calories? They had more space. The Spaniards had more space and the Romans had less. That is why the Romans were known for their lack of physical strength and the Spaniards of physical strength. To Africans, there's Tunisians, Carthaginians, southerly peoples, Phoenicians, basically. Treachery and money, we were always unequal. Why? Because northern Tunisia, back in the day, was the most agriculturally productive place on earth short of Egypt and Iraq. That is why it's unequal. Outside of irrigated floodplains, Tunisia was the most fertile place on earth. So, no one doubted that we were surpassed by the arts and intelligence. Arts. Now, where did the arts come from? The Jews, as I said, did not have visual arts. The Sumerians had visual arts. A lot of the Germanic peoples did. But the Greeks excelled in visual arts. Why is that? It's a postural thing. The Greeks excelled in visual arts because, well, it's hard to explain, but their shoulders were not ideal. Their eyesight was not ideal either. But their understanding of the human body, their understanding of the workings of the mind and the workings of explicit anatomy was absolutely top-notch. So that is why they did that. They did not do schematics. They did not do the simplest possible configuration that could be done in order to present man to the world. They did the most elaborate sculpture any man could think of. And their descendants in the Renaissance did the same. But what succeeded against all of them was careful selection. Very careful selection. Now, what does that mean? Okay, let's go into some detail. How was the Roman army back then chosen? Well, there were volunteers. There were certainly volunteers, but there weren't enough. So they hired barbarians. They hired Balkanoids, essentially, from Serbia, Albania, Croatia. And most importantly, they drafted people. Now, how did the draft work? The draft worked very simply. They got landlords to select people. They got landlords to select people from their plantations so that they could be drafted into the military. Okay, so that was the system of selection. And it was very, very difficult to get the landlords to offer anyone who wasn't a total nuisance. That is how the system of selection worked. So how do you select people from those people who were selected by the landlords? How do you select people from the volunteers? That is not a very easy problem. It is a problem that is most closely related to the field of economics. So this is why there is no economics, essentially, in the Roman Empire before, like, the 2nd or 3rd century. And then after that, you get stuff that deals with economics. This isn't quite it, but it's important. Structural rules to speak daily exercises. We'll get into that. Prior acquaintance and field practice with all possible eventualities in war and battle. Interesting. And strict punishment of cowardice. That's good. That's good. Strict punishment of cowardice. Scientific knowledge of warfare nurtures courage. What does scientific mean? It does not mean modern science. It does not mean this random bullshit, this less than astrology thing of doing massive data sets and finding absolutely nothing from them. It means something else. It means careful observation. And it means doing things on the basis of theory, not just practice. It means doing things on the basis of theoretical information. Let's go on. Scientific knowledge of warfare nurtures courage in battle. That is good. Now, why does it nurture courage in battle? Because it trains men to think. It trains men to fight on the field of battle without the encumbrance of internal voices, without the encumbrance of disobedience, without the encumbrance of stupidity. That is why it's important. No one is afraid to do it. He is confident of having learned. Well, a small force which is highly trained in the conflicts of war is more apt to victory. A raw and untrained horse is always exposed to slaughter. That's right. From what regions recruits should be levied? Alright, this is the important part. This is the important part. If you're starting here, start here, folks. This is going to be important. The order of our subject demands that the first part should treat of the provinces and peoples from which recruits should be levied. Now, it is common knowledge that recruits, the cowards and brave men are born in all places. Is that true? Of course it is. Why is it important? Not here. I'll explain that later. However, nation surpasses nation warfare in climate. Climate! Now, Vegetius does not do genetics. He solely does environment. So when he says climate, he means environment. When he says climate, he always means the effect of climate on people's environmentally based musculature, eyesight, hair, and other very important factors. An enormous influence on the strength of minds and bodies. In this connection, let us not omit what has won the approval of the most. They tell us that all peoples that are near the sun, that is, the Egyptians, the Arabs, the Persians, the Tunisians, and who else? Well, the Sicilians, to some extent. Yes, and the Ethiopians, don't forget those. Being parched by great heat, are more intelligent. That is, they're able to do more work. That is, work that would normally be considered by people as showing intelligence, like, say, the Great Pyramid, the monuments of Persepolis, the tombs and the churches of Libella, stuff like that. Is that really good? No, maybe. Maybe a little. But does it matter much? I don't know. More intelligent, but have less blood. What does that mean? It means they have less blood flow. Less blood flows to their brains. Why? Many different reasons. It depends on a lot of things, but the most important is they are able to do more work with bad posture. They're able to do more stuff with postures that are not exactly ideal. The Germans, without exception, always had ideal posture. The southerly peoples, it's a little bit more doubtful. It is certainly doubtful after about 1200 BC. I'll go into that. And therefore lack steadiness and confidence. Now, why do they lack steadiness and confidence? For a very simple reason. They have consciousness. Did the Germans have consciousness? Absolutely not. Did the Imperial Japanese have consciousness? What moron would argue that? Did the Chinese army of Jiang Jieshi have consciousness? No. Did George W. Bush have consciousness? Absolutely not. All right, let's go into that a little more. Steadiness and confidence. Now, why is that? They have no instinct. They have only consciousness, no instinct. They can't really draw the obvious conclusions from their training. They can't do what they do normally because they don't know what to do. Consciousness is a very limited thing. Consciousness only affects about maybe 10% of the brain. 90% is the unconscious mind, the automatic mind. So what does this say? Steadiness and confidence, where does that come from? Steadiness and confidence can only come from the unconscious portions of the brain. That's what Vegetius is saying. And it is a very important insight you should understand and remember in all areas of life.